I'd like to show you a problem that often happens when you package food into Mylar bags. And it happens quite often if you vacuum pack Mylar bags. I have here 2 packages of Kahlua Pig I did several months ago. This one right here was vacuum packed, and you can see how tight the food is in the bag. This shows that the vacuum is holding. At the same time, I also did this bag right here. But with this bag is no longer nice and tight like this bag is. This bag kind of looks more like a pillow. And what has happened is somewhere, either through the seam I made up here, or more likely somewhere in the bag itself, is a small pinhole, which has allowed all the vacuum to escape. And as the vacuum escapes, this is going to suck in oxygen, or it's going to suck in the atmosphere, which contains oxygen, and the likelihood of this food going bad in the long run is much higher. Now, in the short run, food like this is not going to go bad that often. So this is a proposal I'd like to throw out, is don't be so quick to package up your food into storage. Now, I keep my food in these big, large totes. When I'm ready to pack up my food, I just put them in these big, large totes like this. Inside I'll have a copy of the inventory list, and I can put 22 Mylar bags inside this tote. And then these totes go down in my basement. But what I'm asking you guys to consider is don't be so hasty in trying to put your food inside the totes and put them into storage. What I propose is putting your bags aside for 2 weeks before putting them into storage. And I'll show you why. Now, there is some speculation whether these bags have holes in them when you purchase them. For example, as you can notice, sometimes you can put a flashlight inside a bag and you can see these pinholes of light. But these pinholes of light are not holes that go through all 3 layers. Each bag has 3 layers. There's an inner layer, a foil, and an outer layer. And these little pinholes are primarily caused by a hole that's in the foil layer, where the inner layer and the outer layer are still good layers and have not been perforated. The primary cause for the holes in our storage bags is not from manufacturing, but it's actually the food we put into the storage bags. For example, snap peas, they can have some pretty sharp points on the ends of the peas that could puncture the bag when put under a vacuum. Or peppers, when they dry out, they can be pretty hard. Right here I have some baked beans. The baked beans are high in sugar, and when they are freeze-dried, they can get very, very hard. And there are some very sharp pointed corners on these baked beans that can puncture the material when they're put under a vacuum. So let me show you this right here. If I give this bag a big of a squeeze, you can see water coming out of this little teeny hole right there. And that little teeny hole is enough to allow oxygen back in to your food. But without having water in here, you may never notice that. I have other little creases and divots in this bag, but they're not leaking. So it's hard to know which ones will actually leak and which ones are not. Here's another one right here. This is a little teeny tiny leak. I actually put some green food coloring on this one, but you can see right there, this is a little teeny hole that's allowing the liquid to come through. And this one is a little more noticeable, but this is quite a nice little tear right there. But that allowed all the oxygen to get into my snap peas. It can take up to 1 week for these oxygen absorbers to do their job, and they're in a confined space, such as in a Mylar storage bags. It can take 7 days for the oxygen absorbers to absorb all the oxygen inside of a bag. Now, depending on the temperature of the food that goes into the bag and on the size of the oxygen absorber, often your bag will develop a natural vacuum inside. These are 3 bags that have a natural occurring vacuum inside. These were not vacuum packaged. So I have some green beans right here, and you can see where the natural vacuum that developed inside this bag has sucked in the walls of the bag, and you can feel how nice and tight it is. The same here with my raspberries. They're nice and tight, and you can kind of feel that the material is sucked up against the food. Same with these strawberries. You can see where the film has been sucked up against the food, and this often happens naturally when you use an oxygen absorber and when you place warm food inside of a bag, and as it cools, it creates its own vacuum. So these are all normal, and this is how your bags should appear. So after a 2-week time period, if your bags still appear this way, I'd say they're safe to put into storage. However, after 2 weeks, your bags have developed this puffy effect, then something is probably wrong. So here's some peanut butter eggnog, which is an RUTF. Take a look at this bag. There's lots of room for the food to move around, and I can kind of move the air inside this bag around, so I can tell that this no longer had a natural vacuum in it, but there's a hole somewhere in this bag that has allowed oxygen to go back inside. Same thing here with this dark meat turkey. This bag is no longer nice and tight, but has lots of room inside. And just by observation, I can kind of see a little kind of a teeny pinhole. Now, I'm not sure if this is the actual leak, but it could be. And of course, the same with my Kahlua pig. So after a 2-week period, I'd take a look at all your bags, to set them aside somewhere, and then inspect them to see if they've developed air within the bag, because that is going to be a sign that your packaging has failed and needs to be repacked. And after a 2-week period, you don't need to really refreeze dry your food, but just take your food and put it into a new bag with a new oxygen absorber and go ahead and seal it up. If your bag is several months old, then you might want to dump the contents of the food onto a harvest tray and just throw it back into a freeze dryer. And because this food is going to be pretty dry, it's going to be a very short cycle. If you use mason jars don't have the same problem that Mylar bags often have, but still mason jars can still fail. If there happens to be a chip on the rim of the jar, or if the seal on the lid is bad, you could lose vacuum. So after 2 weeks, just test the top of the lid, and if you can make a popping sound, that's not a good sign, and perhaps you've lost vacuum in your jar and you need to move the food from this jar into another jar and put in a new oxygen absorber. So as a follow-up, before you end up putting your food into storage where you may not see it for several months or years, just put the food aside for 2 weeks and then give each bag an inspection before you put it into long-term food storage. Check the bags for extra room. A properly stored Mylar bag should have some vacuum inside the bag from the oxygen absorber. If you can move the food around quite easily and there's lots of air gaps inside the bag, you probably need to repackage that food. So I hope this video was helpful, and the most important thing is to safeguard the amount of time and money you have put into your food storage. You know, it's one thing to lose maybe a bag of snap peas that may only be worth $1 or $2, but to lose several dollars or $10 or $30 in spoiled meat because you lost the vacuum, well, that can really hurt. Anyway, I hope you found this video helpful. Please subscribe, and as always, go forth and freeze dry the world, and I'll send another video to you soon.